My name is Eric Clark. For those that don't know, I've been with SWicTech for over 3 years. I joined the company back in 2017, and my role is a client success associate. So I help with account management, outside sales, and some of our marketing efforts, and sit in our client engagement team. Shane actually sits on the same team and carries the same title. His role is a little bit more focused on like technical account management and inbound, taking care of our customers that we already have and making sure that they're having success in what they're trying to do. So with that being said, for those that don't know who SWicTech is, I know there's a number of folks in the room that already are familiar with us or do business with us, but there's also a number of folks that don't or haven't. So with that being said, we are located in New Berlin, Wisconsin. At least that's where our office or headquarters are. There's about 30 of us. We did do some hiring over the last couple months throughout COVID. About half of the people in this picture are out on maternity leave. We have something in the water apparently. So some of that hiring was an effort to kind of make sure we had a backfill for some of the gaps right now as everyone's kind of home taking care of their new babies. But for SWicTech, insofar as what we do, the best way to think about us is we're IT as a service. We can act as a company's IT department. We can be complementary or supplementary to existing IT staff. We also help with strategic planning. We do sit on the board as an IT seat for some businesses and help with that big picture strategic plan. And we also do a lot of different projects and architecture for those projects and the actual execution deployment of those projects. So, think of us as your one-stop shop for IT needs. And we're doing some really fun things in all the various disciplines of IT, specifically around like cybersecurity and disaster recovery and backups and things like that. For our agenda today, we do a lot of these events. We call them brain food events. We typically like to start with why. Why are we doing this event? So we'll start there, and then we'll talk about migrating from a voice over IP traditional phone solution, or maybe you're already on like Skype for Business. Talk about some of the features and capabilities, the infrastructure that might be required, as well as the limitations or minimum things that you need from like your internet service provider, as well as what are the economics of cloud voice? Are you going to save money? Are you going to spend more? What is it like using Teams voice? What is some of the hardware you can choose? And what is the licensing and cost associated with that? And at the end, we'll take questions. But before we do get started, I do want to clarify, if you have a question along the way, please go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can post a question in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you as well. So whatever your level of comfortability is there, we're happy to accommodate. We do have someone technical on the call with us. Chris Spearing on our team is going to be in the background and ready to go to answer questions that are going to be deeper than what I can answer from a technical standpoint. So if anything gets beyond or below the surface here, then he'll be able to help out there. That being said, I guess when we talk about the why, obviously, look, it's 2020, we're in Q4, and I'm sure we can all hardly wait for this year to end for a number of reasons. But, this year was a big catalyst for kind of forcing us to swallow the pill of work from home or work from anywhere, but primarily work from home. I don't think we're to the anywhere point yet because a lot of coffee shops and things like that aren't really fully open or operational or allegedly safe. So that being said, we look at this stat here: 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working remotely by the end of 2021. So with that as a catalyst, obviously there's a number of folks that are working from home, and what does that voice solution look like for them? For SWicTech, we've been using Teams voice since its early inception. We were one of the first companies on it. We were very early. We believe.
Would you say that was before the school, Eric?
Is that Shane? Did he get here at 2:08? Good job. Yeah. I don't know where, I can't see your video, but I'm glad you're in here with me, so that's great. Everybody, Shane Crane. Yeah, so what I was saying is essentially, it was a really easy transition for us when COVID struck because we were already on this platform. So there was really no interruption of workflow. It was actually quite delightful. We already had Teams, fully implemented and on their voice solution. So for us, it was not a big deal. And we did help a number of companies make that switch also in the wake of that. So it's something that we're experienced with, have a lot of knowledge about. And again, as we eat our own dog food, we want to be making sure that this stuff is working the way it ought to be before we take that to market. As we look back at the last, I don't know, 6 to 9 months or so, Microsoft Teams has seen a major surge in adoption. In fact, these numbers aren't totally up to date. I couldn't find a graphic that displayed it. But on the earnings call that Microsoft had on October 27th, the numbers they announced then were 115 million users. So far and away beyond what Slack had reported. You can just see here the hockey stick growth of this platform. There's a lot of adoption, a lot of obviously because of what has happened, but it's a really robust platform. The ease of use is really great, and you just get so much more than a phone system. And in the other catalyst here, other than just working from home, and I didn't see anybody fill this out in the response early on for the form, the survey, but there are a number of businesses that we've engaged with that are on Skype for Business already for their phone solution. Just that is being retired or sunsetted on July 31st of 2021, at which point it will not be accessible or supported. So if you're a business that is on that platform, start planning now so you can make that migration. So just a call out there as to, again, one of the reasons you might be considering the solution. When we think about the capabilities, there are a lot. There's a lot of upside. When putting this presentation together, we asked ourselves, what are the cons? And we didn't put any down because in our minds, there weren't really any that were notable. Just like really quickly here, as we look at this picture, and I'll try not to bore everybody too much, but you do get improved collaboration. This is not just a phone system. This is a hub for all things Microsoft ecosystem. So you get chat and you get all of your Microsoft apps and you get collaboration. There's a lot more to it than just a phone system. So keep that in mind. If you're looking for just a phone system, this might actually not be for you. It does scale really well. You only pay for the licenses that you want or need. So in the turmoil that is COVID, there's still a lot of trepidation and uncertainty and volatility. So if there's extreme growth, if you're in a lucky industry, if there's detractions there, if you're going the other direction, this is very elastic. So you pay for what you need. It is really easy to add additional users as you grow without adding infrastructure. It's a cloud-based solution, so you don't have to have capital expenses going into buying more equipment and configuring that and setting that up. It's just literally clicks of the button to light up more features and users. And users are going to find the phone features very simple and easy to use. I mentioned earlier on, like SWicTech is on this platform. I can use this for my cell phone. I can use it for my computer. It's very straightforward. The learning curve is minimal, if at all. And then without infrastructure, you can save a lot of costs up front that you would save over time without having to worry about replacing that infrastructure down the road. If you do another capital expense on traditional phone system, at some point it's going to need some TLC again. That stuff does get antiquated over time, and this industry moves really fast. So when we think about the setup, you assign a license, add or port a phone number, and you're ready to use it. Their additional setup is required for different aspects like auto attendance and call queues, etc. We will discuss that as we get into the upcoming slides here. And you can answer and make calls on any device that is signed up with Teams. Again, talking about like your cell phone, your computer, maybe if you have a tablet, whatever device you're using this, I think you get it on up to 5 devices. Pretty straightforward there. And generally, this is going to work anywhere. So you can work from across the country. We have one of our employees is in, I think he's in Sacramento, California. We wouldn't know the difference. It's like, he could be in New Berlin, he could be in Wisconsin, he could be in Sacramento. It's the same difference as far as how we work with him there. So it's pretty cool that we have that ability. As we talk about the capabilities, we'll spend a little bit of time on these slides here. If any questions come up through these next couple of slides and something gets more technical, I'll lean on Chris and or Shane. But it is pretty straightforward to port existing phone numbers over. You simply create a port order. And if you have an existing phone number you like to transfer to Teams, that's how you would start that. When the numbers are ported, you can assign those phone numbers to your users and services such as like audio conferencing for conference bridges, auto attendance, call queues. And after you port your numbers over to Teams, Microsoft does become your service provider. you can disconnect your service at that time with your old service provider or carrier. I'm just trying to keep an eye on the comments here to make sure I'm not missing anything. Insofar as what you would need to provide during a port, not too much. It's very important that you get everything correct, that you watch out for typos or transposition errors. There's a lot of gotchas that can happen there. It's a really easy process, but paying attention to those details is going to be a pretty critical aspect of that process. You need to have all of the account information from your current carrier. That information you entered is mostly found on the most recent bill or invoice from your current service provider. So as long as you have one of those, you should be ready to go. These are all things that SWicTech can help with, by the way. I just wanted to cover some of these aspects. Some things to note: there's something called a full port or a partial port. A full port is when you transfer all of your numbers from your current service provider over to Teams. And when you're asked for the phone numbers that you want to transfer, you must include the billing telephone number, BTN, along with all the other phone numbers on your account. That's a full port. A partial port is when you're only transferring some of your phone numbers over from your current service provider for Teams. There may be different reasons why this is the case. I'm not going to get into that, but just to know that you don't have to do, it's not all or nothing, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Maybe you have different locations or something like that. And then how long does it take to port a number? That's a question that I think is pretty common that we've been asked. And so just a general rule of thumb, it takes between 7 and 14 days to be processed. But depending on your current service provider, it may take up to 30 days. Hopefully that's not the case, but just kind of prepare for the worst and expect the best kind of scenario. And then lastly, some folks have asked, can I port it out of Microsoft Teams? And to port out from Teams, it's pretty straightforward. Also, you do have to put in a request with your new carrier, and you'll need to do some porting in the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, but not a major thing. It's pretty straightforward. As I've covered that, before I go on to the next slide, I wanted to stop for just a moment to see if any questions had come through. I don't see any. If you have one, you can raise your hand or comment. All right. When we talk about call queues, I don't mean to patronize anybody, but certainly there's a different range of different people in the room that may or may not know what some of these things are. So I wanted to make sure that I am taking the time to speak to them. Auto attendance, call queues are like for paging systems. If you have a warehouse or a shop production facility, that is something that you can do with Microsoft Teams. Those are questions that we've been asked. Looks like a question did come through from Harleen. Hi, Harleen, thank you. Can you port over as extensions or just numbers? That's a question I'm not sure about, so I'll kick that over to Chris to respond in the comments. Or Chris, if you have the answer to that, feel free to unmute and you can reply. Thank you. You can also add hunt groups. So if you have a sales team or a help desk or a customer service, you can make sure that that call is going to be routed to that particular group. These things aren't very difficult to set up, but don't take that from me. I'm not technical in nature. And then you can also set up an auto attendant. So the caller can choose person by name or touch tone number. And for those that aren't familiar, an auto attendant is what lets people call your organization and navigate a phone menu system to speak to the right department, call queue, person, or operator. And you can create those within the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, or you can do it with PowerShell for those that are more technical. Another question here. I'm sorry if I missed this, but do you need a particular business subscription with Microsoft in order to subscribe to the phone system? Yeah, and we'll get to that towards the end. You do need to have something like that. So, and thank you, Shane, for jumping in there as well. And Shane, if you have a specific talking point there, please go ahead.
Yeah, Eric, I would just like to, I'm getting kind of an echo, sorry. But I just wanted to call out that on the extensions, you don't really need extensions anymore because numbers and names work really well in Teams. So now you can just transfer by typing in your coworker's name, and or the audio attendant allows you to speak a name to reach out to a specific person instead of dialing an extension. And then, yeah, to your point for Clara's question about business subscriptions, we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty a little bit about how you sign up for licensing and what the phone system licensing looks like.
Yeah, that's a good point. In fact, one of the very first deployments of Teams we did that was not for us, for like a client, that was actually one of the biggest pain points after the fact was I can't dial 444 to reach, Tom any longer. This is not how we've always done things. However, what we've found is as long as the proper expectation has been set, and we do some good training for that, it's actually significantly easier to just start to type their name into Teams. It finds them through your Active Directory and you click call. Same thing for transfers. Very easy. You don't have to memorize these extensions. You don't have to have a paper on your desk anymore and to look at that with highlighters. It's all just kind of baked in and it's pretty straightforward. Kind of like, when you do a search on Google, search to auto predict, it'll do that on Teams for the people you're looking for. Or if you have like really common people that you work with frequently, those people will be at the top of the list. You can favorite them and things like that. So pretty straightforward. Okay, and another aspect here for those that might be more technical, you do get some dashboard abilities for analytics, so you can actually monitor and troubleshoot call quality. You get call analytics. This shows detailed information about the devices, networks, connectivity that are related to very specific calls and/or meetings for each user in Teams. And then Teams admin and help desk agents will use this information to troubleshoot call quality and connection problems in a specific call. So they are always asking for feedback after you hang up on a call or meeting. How is the call quality of this? You can rate that. I usually do. It gets annoying after a while, but it's good to have that. If it isn't good, you want to tell them that. And then there's another thing called the call quality dashboard, also known as the CQD. This gives you a network-wide view of call quality across your organization, so you can use that information to help you identify and fix some problems. You can prioritize important network traffic using these tools, where if someone's like streaming or downloading apps, maybe that's less important than taking a sales call that's going to the hunt group or something like that. You get to set some of those priorities on the admin portal. That's again something that SWicTech is capable and able to help with. Just know that that is a possibility, and you get these tools. And here's some generic images that kind of show what that can look like. And Shane, if you have anything to add along the way, jump in. I'm glad that you're here with me, so this is great. When we look at caller ID, this is pretty basic stuff. This isn't, rocket science, but there are some things to note that you can control the caller ID for both inbound and outbound calls for the phone system. You can do this by using a policy called calling line identity, and the caller ID functionality is available to all phone systems, regardless of PSTN connectivity. So you can change outbound caller ID. There are 3 options available. You can do the telephone number assigned to the user, which is the default. You can do a telephone number that is classified as a service and a toll-free number in your calling plans, or you can set it to anonymous. So good to know. And similarly with inbound caller ID, the phone system will show a caller ID from an external phone number if the number is associated with a user in Azure Active Directory. If the phone number is not in Azure Active Directory, the telco provider display name will be shown if it is available. So just some things that you can toggle back and forth here, some things that you can do with it depending on what you have. And then, lastly, from like the feature standpoint, you do have cloud voicemail where you can have transcription of the voicemail of that audio. It can be sent via email. It can also live within Teams. And I thought this was kind of interesting. I just learned this the other day in putting this together, but you can even enable or disable the ability to mask profanity. This is disabled by default, but can be enabled for an entire organization or even just specific users. So if someone really wants to make sure they're getting the full message, you can make sure that that is on for them, and maybe depending on organization, you can turn that off for some others. So neat little nugget of information there that I didn't know was a thing. I wouldn't have considered that. Did you know that, Shane?
I did not know, but I can say that the voicemail feature in Teams is much appreciated. So I think it also sends an email to you when you get a voicemail. So not only do you get this transcription and you can play the audio right from within Teams, but it will also send you the audio file and the transcription via email. So it's crazy how quickly you rely on this type of technology once you have it, and you don't realize how useful it is until you think back to voicemails when you actually had to like call in and type in a PIN, dial your own phone number, all that stuff, just to listen to your voicemails on your desk phone. So this is just one of those cool little features, and the fact that it has even more capability in it than we thought is pretty awesome.
Yeah, totally agree. And I remember those days, and I actually remember the even earlier days when people had answering machines. So, oh boy. Okay, so this is an important aspect here. This is some of the emergency calling abilities, and I guess dynamic emergency calling is something. Sorry, I'll stop because a question came through, and I want to make sure that we're answering that. Do you all have experience with Net2 Phone or Nextivia? If so, what do you see as the difference or advantages to Microsoft Teams Phone? I have not heard of those ones, although we did do extensive research on alternative solutions. I don't know if Chris has any experience with that. We can maybe jump in the comments, or we can park it till Q&A.
Eric, I can touch on that just real quick. I think it looks like those are similar to like Ring Central is really another good example. I think the big advantages that you're going to see with Teams is the fact that it's not just a phone system, right? So once you're in Teams, now you have this whole collaborative environment for your coworkers and your organization to be able to communicate, access files, make internal meetings and calls, external meetings, and then if you have the phone system piece, external phone calls. And so I think that's the big advantage when we're talking about Microsoft Teams here over other cloud-based phone systems. As far as like differences in the actual phone system piece goes, it's going to be very similar across the board, both pricing wise to get the phone system set up and like port over your numbers, and then as well as use. And we'll show you in a moment here what it looks like to use the Teams phone system. It's very simple. It's very basic, right? You really just now you have a dial pad on your computer for calling people. That's really the big difference between having and not having a phone system on your computer. So there aren't going to be really any differences across the cloud-based solutions for that part.
Good to go. Yeah, and that actually is like the only con I listed earlier on, is that like maybe you don't need all of that, or maybe you don't want to be totally attached to all the Microsoft stuff. So that's something that's worth considering depending on what you're looking to get into here. So dynamic emergency calls, this is important to note because, when you think of a traditional phone system, you have a specific location and IP associated with that. With Teams, if I call 911 from my Teams app on my phone, am I doing that from our New Berlin office? Am I doing that from my home residence? Am I doing that, where am I? Sacramento, California? How is it going to know? And these are things that need to be set up on the back end to make sure that you have that dynamic emergency calling, so it can do that based on your current location. And if I'm missing anything, Shane, please jump in, but I do have a couple notes here in the slide to talk about that if there's any other questions there.
I think you covered it.
Cool, thank you. So infrastructure and internet service provider considerations. Look, if you're going to go down this path, you're going to want to shore up any of your like networking gear. It's a good time to evaluate that stuff and maybe do a refresh if you haven't in a while, or maybe level set some of that stuff and get it on an even playing field, so to speak. But additionally, look at your internet service provider and ensure that you have enough bandwidth to handle a lot of this now cloud environment, all of this traffic that's going to be coming to and from. If that stuff isn't set up, you're going to have a really poor experience potentially for your users. And that isn't the fault of Teams. That could be the fault of your network and your internet service that you have, which could leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth. And that's not a good solution. So I don't know if you have any particular recommendations when you talk about networking or ISP. I believe what we had is like at least 50 up and 50 down, or 50 by 50. On the networking side, again, it's just a good opportunity to evaluate where you're at with that.
Yeah, that's a great point, Eric. And I think I would echo that and also say this isn't just for Teams or just for a phone system either. This is really just true of cloud solutions in general, right? So if you're moving to more of a cloud solution for your servers, et cetera, the new bottleneck, instead of whether or not your servers are up or down, is whether or not your internet is fast enough and whether or not your internet is up or down. So it's really important to have enough speed for the number of people, the number of devices, the size of your office and locations, and then also to have the proper equipment in place so that it can be with a firewall and enough network ports for everybody to use all of the gear that they have, etc.
Yeah, networking was kind of like an obligatory, oh, I have networking gear. Now it's becoming a critical component as all of this hardware has been put out into the cloud. So it's a really critical piece. I did see a question come through about would we recommend a backup of some kind for a phone in case of an internet outage?
Yeah, that's a great question, Harleen. I think if you're going to have a cloud-based phone system, then having a backup internet solution, which you mentioned you guys are looking into, will suffice to keep your phone system up and running. All you need is internet at that point. And really, I should actually caution and say, you don't necessarily need internet at your office for someone to be able to make a call out. If they have a Wi-Fi hotspot, or even from their cell phone, if it has 5G service, if your internet goes down, you can still make phone calls from your Teams app or another cloud-based phone system.
Would that still be true if like a call came into a hunt group or something like that, though?
Yes, all of those features should still work on the cloud-based side. And so as long as the individual user has their Teams app or notifications set up appropriately on their desktop computer and their smartphone, they'll get the call on the appropriate device as long as it has some sort of internet service, whether that be from a Wi-Fi hotspot on your computer or if they're just on their smartphone.
Cool. Great question. Okay, so this is a good slide. Benefit versus cost. What are some of the economics of this? The way that you ought to think about it is just review your existing bills to know how much you are paying for your current phone service. This includes all the hardware, the software that you might have on-premise phone infrastructure, handsets, including conference rooms, and then remember to also factor in new hardware costs too. Some people may want to keep like a traditional handset, and others might want headsets. Like these are things to consider. You may not need that. Notice neither Shay nor I are using any handsets. We're just using the mic that's built into our laptop. I know I have the Jabra noise canceling fancy headset, but I don't use it at the home office. There's not much of a need for it. At the office, though, it makes more sense to have that phone call in my ear and block a lot of the noise in the office, things like that. So those are important considerations depending on people's comfort level and things like that. And we'll get into some of the hardware coming up here and what that can look like. But additionally, what are your current phone system costs? With this, you don't have a contract, right? You can consolidate other conferencing tools. So remember, this isn't just a phone solution. You can now maybe get rid of your WebEx or your GoToMeeting, whatever it is you might be using to accommodate that, because this is baked into Teams. You get the speech to text voicemail integration stuff. So we've talked about that already. That can tie in with your Exchange Online. There's really zero capital expense if you don't need a lot of that hardware. There's just, you already have everything. You have your computer, your smartphone, so it just becomes an operating expense. And just as a final note, like you get governance and compliance with Microsoft Teams. Microsoft has more compliances and certifications for its cloud offering than any other player out there. So your data is handled properly. It's unlike any other. So it's really good to be aware of that too, depending on what industry you're in and who you're serving as your clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Eric, I would just like to kind of add to that. Yeah, you're going to get rid of a lot of the capital expenditure up front, and you may have some labor expenses or costs to implementing a new cloud-based system, but a lot of these cloud-based systems, especially when we're talking about Microsoft Teams, are not going anywhere, right? They're only going to get better, faster. They're going to have more infrastructure behind them as Microsoft builds that out and adds features and solutions. And so this shouldn't be the type of solution where you're going to have to replace it again in another 5 to 7 to 10 years like you would with a traditional phone system. So it's kind of more of a one and done solution at that point.
Yeah, set it and forget it ish.
I think we do have a question before we move on.
Okay, I'll leave the slide.
little bit of a comment that I can touch on. Someone mentioned that there are some concerns around that maybe some of the phones, so I'm thinking like the hardware might expire after a certain amount of time. That is certainly true if you get like the handsets and some of the hardware and stuff that we're talking about. That sort of equipment is definitely still going to depreciate over time, and you're going to need to replace it. I think that's going to be a little bit longer of a timeline as the technology and that equipment gets smarter and better and faster. But yeah, you're certainly going to see that you'll have to replace some of that equipment down the road.
Cool. And if you want to take over here on some of these upcoming slides, I think this is more your domain, so I'm happy to let you kind of drive from here.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Eric. So really, this is just a slide to show you a little bit about what the phone system looks like. I mentioned earlier, it's a really simple environment, but we'll just walk through a little bit of this here to show you. So once you have the phone system feature, you can access it from that calls tab on the left-hand menu of your Microsoft Teams app. And if you're on a mobile device, it's going to be a little bit smaller, but very similar. You'll kind of get a similar feel to this computer or tablet style here. So from that calls tab, which already exists if you don't have phone system and you are using Microsoft Teams to call internally and maybe set up meetings. But once you've got a phone system set up and licensing correct, and you've got a number per person, you'll have your own phone number listed there, and then you'll have that dial pad section. And so now you can dial externally to any phone number domestically if you have a domestic plan, and then internationally if you have an international plan. A few other pieces that you'll see on here that are useful and worth calling out. You've got a speed dial section, so you can add specific contacts or other users in your environment to your speed dial. You have just general contacts. So within contacts, you'll have everybody else that's a part of your Microsoft 365 organization. In a lot of cases, that will be tied back to your Active Directory or your directory for like computer logins and things like that. So that will all be one and the same. Their names and titles and everything else will kind of come through there. And then you can add other contacts manually. I will point out one kind of downside to Microsoft's contacts feature is it's not super robust yet. So you do have to go in and manually add contacts one by one. You can copy and paste the information from somewhere else, but there is no like import feature at this time. I got to imagine that's something that's coming very soon as more and more people jump onto this phone system solution, but it is one small downside. Caller ID is fantastic these days in Microsoft Teams, so it's not a huge issue. I don't really even add many contacts. I don't know about you, Eric, but I have a few really important ones that I added at the start of all of this, and then ever since then, caller ID works so well I don't need them.
Yeah,
and then
a couple early on, and that's it too. So
yeah. And then you've just got history and voicemail there. We touched on voicemail a little bit ago. It shows you a transcription and you can play the audio right from within Teams. And the history tab will just show you your past calls, both incoming and outgoing. And I think it shows you like the duration of them and stuff like that. So now we want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the hardware before we get into some of the licensing details. And it looks like we got a quick question here. So just to confirm, with caller ID, you can add external contacts too. Yeah, so those are kind of two different pieces. Caller ID is through your phone number provider and or the provider of the person who's calling you. But normally it will light up and show you who it is, either their name, if it's like an individual cell phone or smartphone, or the name of the company, if it's coming from like a main or direct line. And then, yes, you can add external contacts into Teams. So like I said, you can't really import them. It's a more of a manual process, but you can go in and type in Eric Clark, first name, last name, and a phone number and add them right into your system. I think it also offers a field for a title. All right. So shifting gears a little bit, like I said, to the hardware. So this shows you kind of the three main pieces of hardware that you would use when you have a phone system. We already talked about the laptop screen there. So that's if you have a laptop or a desktop, you can have the Teams app installed on that device, and you're going to have access to your phone system or your calling tab. On a mobile device, it's going to be very similar, just kind of shrunken down. You install the Teams app, get signed in, and now you have access to your account. So that means when you call out from the Teams app, it's going to appear as though it's coming from your office or your direct line. And then the third one there is kind of a traditional, or I guess the new Microsoft Teams take on a traditional phone solution. This one is from Yealink, but Microsoft has teamed up with a lot of different providers, Yealink, LG, Polycom, and so on, to build similar handsets like this, where you now have a Teams interface on your handset. And so this handset is plugged into an Ethernet connection in the office, and you sign in with your Microsoft 365 account, and then you'll receive incoming calls and you can dial out. It'll have speakerphone.
You can see your meetings from there. You can open your calendar on that screen, so that Yealink screen that you see there, you can pull. I mean, it's the Teams app as you would see it anywhere else. So you can join a meeting from your calendar from like your hard phone if you want to put it on speaker. If you're calling a contact or a client for a meeting that was booked, you can pick up the headset. I mean, it really is. It's the same experience across all devices. So it really is. This is the office, or this is the phone that I have at the office that I haven't used in some time. Actually, kind of miss it now that I see it here, but it's pretty great. It really is a similar experience across all the devices.
Yeah, so that handset is a great option for people who still want that phone, right? They want that physical phone at their desk to pick up and talk on. And then there are a whole host of individual devices that you can use as well. So we've got that handset there. We talked about the computer, the smartphone. You can use a headset, right? So I've got my headset here with the boom mic and everything. This is kind of a fancy one from Jabra. But it doesn't need to be a fancy headset. You can use something as simple as the earbuds or headphones that come with your Apple phone. As long as it's got a mic and speakers, you can just plug it in and go. So that's another area that Eric was talking about. You don't necessarily need that capital expenditure for handsets or headsets if people are comfortable just using the microphone and speaker on their laptop from home, or plugging in an external microphone or speakerphone, or just their Apple headphones. And that side of it is kind of endless. Any device that has a speaker and microphone is going to work for that. And then there are a lot of other devices like the Yealink handset that will offer you kind of more of a Teams interface away from your computer or away from your smartphone. And then on the right side here, we've got meeting room devices. So Microsoft has been working really hard with a lot of providers. Again, a lot of those common phone solutions like Yealink, Polycom, LG. I think Logitech makes a lot of the webcams and stuff. But now you can build out meeting rooms. So you can transform any sort of room into a meeting room with these screens or these traditional style conference phones, or setting up webcams and maybe like a touchscreen or a TV. And it's kind of endless with the different ways that you can configure these types of rooms for your uses and needs.
And it's pretty beautiful because you can book a room, right, as a Teams meeting. So now when you're setting a meeting, or whether that's internal, external, or blended, that room is now occupied and booked through Teams. So when you get in there, you again literally walk into wherever that room might be, join the meeting from whatever device you might have in there, and you've booked the room and set up a meeting all simultaneously, if that makes sense anyways. So it's a really easy way to make sure that you're not having people double book a room or something like that, and then having to call into a GoToMeeting or a WebEx and using this phone or that phone. It really seamlessly ties all of these things together into one easy solution that's very manageable.
Yeah, and that's showing
as I took your thunder. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Yeah, and this is really a great example of showing that, right? This little touchscreen is the Microsoft Teams room now. And so it's tied back to Outlook and Microsoft Teams and in your calendar, so that you can go in and book this space, and you can see on that little display, it's showing you what event is at what time, and you can just jump right into those calls or dial out a new call to start a conference call. And I think on the next one here, we've just got kind of an example room of what you can do, right? So you can set up displays, whether they're touchscreen or not, a Teams meeting room device to control the calendar. Maybe you've got cameras and speakers and microphones set up across the room so that it really becomes super interactive. And just another alternative, Microsoft offers what's called the Surface Hub. These devices can get pretty pricey pretty quick, but they are really slick. It's going to be kind of an all-in-one package to generate that conference room feel. And so you can see it's got kind of a little camera on it. It's on a cart and it has a battery and speakers, so you can move it around different rooms. It's a touch screen, so you can pull up the whiteboard features from Teams while you're on a call. It makes it kind of a really seamless and slick tool to use Teams, not just the phone system, but kind of the meetings and calls and conference features.
Yeah, so at our office, we don't have the Service Hub 2, which is what you see pictured here. We have the first generation, but that is our conference phone. That is our meeting room. So we book everything through that hub, and it occupies the room. So it's pretty great. The camera knows who's talking. It'll look at the face that is talking. So this other one here is a little bit more sleek, and it can go vertical and horizontal. So a pretty great piece of technology, but like Shane had mentioned, fairly pricey, and until we know when everyone's going fully back to the office, maybe not a big need right now.
Maybe
But
not a good investment, yeah.
yeah. Although there's a lot of like news broadcasters that have like those vertical screens, so it looks like people are standing with them. I've noticed that on TV, so that's kind of interesting.
Cool. So moving away from the hardware side of this, we want to talk a little bit about licensing today. We won't dig too deep into this, but I just want to call out the different pieces. We'll touch a little bit on price, but please don't quote me on prices here. They do change. And I am by no means the person who should be setting up your phone system. We have experts for that. I'm just here to tell you a little bit about it. But essentially, there's kind of three key pieces when you're considering using Microsoft Teams for your calling or for your phone system. There's the phone system license. And so that's the piece that's going to replace kind of the base infrastructure of a traditional phone system. So that's what you light up initially so that you have all of the abilities and features of a traditional phone system or a traditional PBX, where you can now configure call queues and auto attendance, all of the cool, unique features, or I guess I shouldn't say unique, but all the cool features that are offered in the cloud-based phone systems. And so you have to have that as a baseline for each user. And then on top of that, you apply a calling plan. And so that's where you can choose whether it's domestic or international. International calling is significantly more expensive. I believe it's double the price. Thank you, Eric. Here's some of the pricing details. Right, so you've got that base phone system solution, which usually comes in at $8 or $12, and some of these can be packaged together. So it really is going to depend on your environment. Again, I want to stress that these numbers aren't set in stone, and that also there may be cost savings depending upon the type of licensing that you already have for Microsoft 365 and or the type of licensing that you need for other tools and features in the environment. So this is really just from scratch if you're setting up just the phone system. And then I mentioned you've got the calling plans there, and then it'll show you the total price at the end. So you do need both. And then one other piece of all of this that isn't listed here is audio conferencing. And so audio conferencing is the license that you would attach to an individual user so that they have a phone number when they generate just traditional Teams meetings or Outlook calendar meetings, so that people can call into that number rather than have to dial in from Teams. That's really helpful if someone wants to use just a traditional phone line to call into a meeting. And so I think those are an additional $4 or so a user to add that on. And not necessarily everyone in your company is going to need something like that. So that might be an add-on only for the folks that schedule those conference rooms or conference meetings, or maybe a select few people in your organization that really do a lot of conference calls. Yeah.
Any questions about any of that information around the pricing and licensing? And I don't know if Chris has more knowledge or not. I don't know if he's the guy to ask, but on the setup side, probably for sure.
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
will note, Eric, I think we just recently found out that Microsoft is running a lot of promotions to try and get people onto Teams phone systems now as the pandemic kind of continues to roll on. It's becoming more and more useful for folks, and so they're giving a bit of a discount. I want to say it's something like you get a 25% cut on a year of joining Microsoft Teams phone system, and they're offering audio conferencing for free for a year. So there are some incentives as well that we can consider to help people get onto this type of solution.
Fantastic. So, I mean, if this kind of scratched the surface, this presentation, there may still be some things, desired to know more about. If that's the case, let us know, reach out to us, and we can set up some sort of I can't say the word consultation, some sort of consultation to just assess your needs, where you're at, maybe where we can help or kind of help, help you plot the points for your journey there as you look to 2021. We're here to help and be helpful. And again, a number of the folks in the room, like we had mentioned, are people that we already do work with. So obviously, we're no stranger to you guys, and vice versa. And anybody that's new to SWicTech, we're very open to having a conversation. Additionally, we like to promote the next brain food event that we have on deck here on the horizon, which is right around the corner. It's going to be December 9th. And it's an introduction to Power BI, which is Microsoft's business intelligence solution. It's an application that can live inside of Teams, apart from Teams, and it helps you visualize your data in a way that you can't do and get from just a spreadsheet. It is a simple platform to use, but there are some nuances and complexities to it that it is not for the layperson. You have to have some knowledge and experience, probably with Power Apps and Excel. So if you're in like a financial seat or an analyst, this would be a great one for you to attend, or someone from your organization to attend. We are bringing on an additional expert to help us cover this topic from Alt Enter. Jessica Jolly is her name, and she really, really knows her stuff. We've had her co-present on this topic before in the past when we did in-person events once upon a time when we could eat Maggiano's. So if you've been to that one, this might be another good one to attend. It'll be very similar to that. So very 101 level introduction to Power BI. And with that, we'll open the floor here to any questions that anybody has. Again, feel free to unmute yourself if you're comfortable. Throw a question in the chat. Otherwise, if you're good to go, you can simply drop off. We're about, we got about 10 minutes here for Q&A. So if we get some questions coming through, we want to leave enough time to make sure we can answer them.
If we just have a sec, I just want to thank everybody for trying out this. We have done live events through Microsoft Teams before for our webinars. This is the first time we've done a meeting. So thanks for hanging in there with us. We had some technical issues right off the bat and just are getting used to the platform. So I just want to say thank you to you guys.
And thanks for moderating and facilitating, Ryan. Great job. And thanks for Chris for being in the background to answer technical questions.